Your property is now under our jurisdiction. That's how the letter started. No signature, no seal, just a name at the bottom, Michelle Ashford, HOA President. I stood there staring at those words in disbelief. My house wasn't even in the HOA. I'd checked, triple checked before I bought it. But somehow this stranger was claiming control over my property and demanding $250 a month. I should have thrown it away, but something about it felt off. What happened next wasn't just a battle over money, it was a fight for my home, and the worst was yet to come. I had always dreamed of owning my own place somewhere quiet, tucked away from the chaos of city life, a fresh start. When I found this house, I knew it was the one. A small, 3-bedroom bungalow at the end of a dead-end street, with a patch of overgrown grass out back, and a peaceful, almost forgotten feel to it. The price was right, $20,000 under market value, and the real estate agent had been clear: no HOA, no fees, no nosy neighbors telling me what color to paint my mailbox. Just the freedom to live however I wanted. At the time, it seemed like the perfect decision. I was a freelance writer making just enough to scrape by, but not enough to live in a fancy neighborhood with manicured lawns and walls that seemed to whisper rules at you every time you stepped out your front door. I didn't want that. I wanted peace. I moved in by September, quickly getting to work on making the house feel like home. The mornings were slow, a cup of coffee in hand, the sound of rain tapping on the roof as I typed away at my desk, the kind of quiet I hadn't had in years. For the first few weeks, I convinced myself it was all worth it: the silence, the solitude, the space to create. Then the letter arrived. I don't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't this. Your property is now under our jurisdiction. I reread those words over and over like some twisted riddle I couldn't quite solve. I had the deed, the official county records. My property was clearly outside the HOA's reach. The boundaries were marked on a map I'd seen more times than I cared to count. I even had a fence post and a drainage ditch to prove it. But there it was in black and white, as though facts didn't matter anymore. Someone had decided that my property was theirs. And the most bizarre part, the letter wasn't some generic notice, it was official. At least it looked that way. It was carefully worded, mimicking legal language just enough to make it seem like I was the one in the wrong. It made me question everything I thought I knew. Had I missed something? Was I truly outside their jurisdiction? No, I knew I wasn't. But this letter felt like a declaration, like someone had decided it was easier to lie than to let me live in peace. I stood there staring at it for what felt like hours, the cold coffee in my hand forgotten. It wasn't just the demand for money that bothered me. It was the assumption that I would simply comply like so many others before me. It was the blatant disregard for my rights, my property, my autonomy. I tossed the letter aside, but something about it gnawed at me, pulling at the back of my mind. I wasn't just going to roll over and accept this. They wanted a fight. Fine, they'd get one. But I had no idea just how far things would escalate or what it would cost me to win. The next few days were a blur of confusion and mounting frustration. I tried to ignore the letter, tried to convince myself it was a mistake, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. I pulled the letter out again, staring at the lines where Michelle Ashford had demanded payment for services rendered by the HOA. $250 a month. The fee wasn't a one-time thing. It was clear as day, though, not a single shred of evidence had been provided that I owed them anything. The letter wasn't just an overzealous HOA notice, it was a declaration of war. I wasn't about to let this go. I grabbed the folder from my desk drawer, pulled out the deed, the survey map, the county plat. Everything that clearly showed my property was well outside their jurisdiction. I'd checked it all before I signed. Everything was legitimate. No one was going to take my house from me based on some fabricated claim. The following afternoon, I drove to the county recorder's office. Estelle, the woman who worked there, was kind but matter-of-fact. She had that steady, no-nonsense vibe that comes with working with legal documents all day. I handed her my deed and asked her to pull up the HOA records. She scrolled through the pages of legal descriptions and boundary maps, pulling up the official HOA map. The HOA was established in 1998, she explained, scanning the screen, and the borders haven't changed since. She handed me a printout of the map, circling my lot in red with a thick marker. I wasn't in the HOA, and I had the official proof to show it. I asked if anyone had filed a request to change the boundaries. She checked. No filings, no amendments, nothing. I left the county office with the map folded neatly in my jacket pocket, but a strange sense of unease followed me all the way home. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was deliberately trying to push me, test me, see if I would back down. They must have thought I was just another homeowner who would let it slide, someone who wouldn't go to the trouble of digging through county records or making a fuss. They were wrong. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and fired up my laptop. I searched for anything related to view tax, aesthetic maintenance, or any legal precedent that might explain why an HOA could demand money for something I hadn't asked for. Nothing. I tried variations of the terms. Nothing. I closed the laptop, feeling the weight of my frustration. This was getting out of hand, but I wasn't going to just pay to make it go away. Someone was pushing for something more, something bigger, and I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. The sound of the rain against the window made everything feel even more oppressive. Just as I started to calm down, a noise outside caught my attention, a sharp metallic clink. I walked to the window, parting the curtain just enough to peek out. A black SUV was parked at the end of my driveway. The headlights were off, the engine idling, but it sat there motionless. I couldn't make out the driver. All I saw was the silhouette unmoving behind the wheel. The floodlights mounted on the roof rack flared to life, bathing my yard in a harsh white light that cut through the rain like a spotlight. For 10 minutes the car sat there, not moving, not making a sound, just watching. My pulse quickened as I grabbed my phone, snapping a picture of the license plate before the lights flickered off and the car slowly pulled away, tires hissing on the wet pavement. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, my heart racing. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just a random person passing by. Someone was sending a message. They wanted me to know they were watching, and if I didn't do what they wanted, they could show up whenever they felt like it. I saved the photo. I wasn't going to be intimidated. I wasn't going to back down. But I wasn't going to let this slide either. Not now. Not after everything I'd worked for. The next morning, I took a walk around the house, checking every lock, every window. The rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy. I stood at the back door, staring out at the empty land behind my house, the tall grass swaying gently in the breeze. Nothing special about it, but it was mine, my property, and someone was trying to take it from me. That night, the SUV came back. This time, I stood by the window, camera in hand, waiting for it. The same black SUV, same headlights off, same floodlights blazing. It sat there for 10 minutes again, watching, waiting. But this time I didn't flinch. I recorded it all. The license plate, the timestamp, everything. I wasn't going to let them win by intimidation. I was going to use it against them. The next day, I walked to the front of the house and found something that made my blood run cold. A thick, industrial-grade chain wrapped around the gate, locked with a heavy padlock. Someone had come in the night and sealed me in. No note, no explanation, just the chain. I called the police non-emergency line. 2 officers arrived within the hour, walking around the gate taking pictures. They were polite, but I could see the way they exchanged looks. The kind of look that said, "Yeah, we've seen this before." One officer, an older guy with graying hair, shrugged as he wrote down my statement. "HOAs have broad authority," he said with a slow nod. "You should probably get a lawyer." That was it. No report. No investigation. Just a suggestion to file a civil complaint. I stood there watching them drive off, feeling the weight of the injustice press down on me. But I wasn't going to let this slide. No matter what it took, I was going to fight back. The following days blurred together. The wheels of justice were turning, but not quickly enough. Preston and I filed the lawsuit outlining fraud, extortion, and harassment. I was ready to face whatever came next, because I knew the truth was on my side. What I didn't expect was how fast things would escalate. 3 days later, the neighborhood's harvest fair was in full swing. I had set up a simple booth with one purpose: to expose Michelle Ashford for who she really was. The table was bare, except for the evidence copies of the forged map, the official county map, the threatening letters and testimonies from victims who had suffered under her reign. We didn't need fancy displays. We just needed the truth. People started gathering, some hesitant, others curious. And then they started talking, sharing stories about how Michelle had made them pay bogus fees, how she'd posted photos of homes, accused people of violations, and forced them out of their own properties. The more people spoke up, the more it became clear I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only victim. Then Michelle showed up. She walked through the crowd, dressed as if she was heading to a corporate meeting, with that same controlling air she always carried. But this time, she wasn't in charge. She stopped at our table, scanning the documents in silence before making her move. "This is slander," she said loudly, trying to regain control. "I've done nothing but protect property values." Preston stepped forward, calm and collected. "If that's true, why does this map?" He held up both the county's map and the altered one, show a forged boundary line. "The metadata proves it was made only weeks ago. You've been forging documents to harass people." Michelle's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. "That map is an internal update," she said smoothly, trying to twist the narrative. "It's legal, and if you want to dispute it, file a formal challenge. It'll cost you." But Preston didn't back down. "Then you won't mind us requesting those meeting minutes and bylaws under oath." The crowd had gone quiet, all eyes on Michelle. A woman in the back, a longtime resident, spoke up. But if his property isn't in the HOA, why are you charging him fees? And why does your map look different from the county's? Michelle froze for a moment. She wasn't used to being questioned, not publicly, not like this. But she quickly regained her composure and snapped, "Don't listen to them. They're outsiders trying to tear apart our community." She turned and walked away, but her words were already empty. The crowd knew. The truth was out. Michelle couldn't hide behind her lies anymore. She'd tried to control everything, but the power had shifted. As the fair continued, the whispers and questions about Michelle's actions spread like wildfire. By the time we packed up, the story was already being shared first by neighbors, then by the press. The truth had found its way into the open, and there was no going back for Michelle. After the harvest fair, everything changed. The pressure Michelle Ashford had wielded for years slowly crumbled. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Within a week, 3 board members resigned, leaving the association in turmoil. The rest of the neighborhood could breathe again. With Preston's help, we sent the evidence to the district attorney, and the criminal investigation began. Michelle didn't stand a chance. Her forged maps, the extortion, the harassment, it all came to light. Within weeks, the charges were formalized: fraud, extortion, and forgery of public documents. 2 weeks after the fair, I watched the arrest unfold on social media. Michelle, once the powerful HOA president, was handcuffed and led away by police. Her husband stood at the doorway watching helplessly. Michelle was out on bail, but her reign of terror was over. The legal process moved slowly, but Preston and I were in it for the long haul. Michelle eventually accepted a plea deal: 18 months in prison, suspended 3 years of probation, full restitution to the victims, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board. Her public apology in court was hollow mechanical, almost rehearsed. But it didn't matter. The real victory came in the change that followed. Geneva Pritchard, a longtime resident, was elected as the new board president. She promised transparency, fairness, and accountability. The abuses Michelle had perpetrated were over. The HOA became what it was supposed to be: a cooperative, not a dictatorship. Over the next few months, I started to notice the subtle shift in the neighborhood. People who had once avoided me now waved when I passed by. The sense of fear was gone, replaced with a quiet confidence. The community was healing, rebuilding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the weight of the battle lift off my shoulders. I received messages from other victims. Some had paid the fabricated fees, drained their savings just to get peace. Others had lost property value when Michelle falsely claimed violations. One woman sent me a photo of her mortgage statement. She had finally paid off her home, something Michelle's harassment had almost taken from her. I never sought recognition, but hearing their stories was enough. It reminded me why I'd fought. It wasn't just for my property, it was for everyone who had been bullied into silence, everyone who thought they didn't have the power to stand up. Life returned to normal. I went back to my work, finding peace in the small things I had once taken for granted. The quiet rain on the roof, the empty yard behind my house that no one could claim but me. Months later, I finished the book I'd started. It wasn't just a memoir, it was a guide for anyone dealing with HOA abuse. I included the lessons I'd learned: document everything, know your rights, and never back down. I wasn't an activist, but I knew I could help others who were facing the same struggle. The book found an audience. Messages poured in from people who had read it and fought back. One reader wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to stand up. I documented everything, and my HOA dropped the case in 2 weeks." Knowing that my fight had helped others was more satisfying than any legal victory. Months later, a neighbor stopped by with coffee and a small gift, a potted plant. We didn't talk much about Michelle. We didn't need to. Life had moved on. The world had been washed clean, and the simple act of standing up had made all the difference.